So, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are and when you're watching this, because it will then go on to our website. And also on that, we're now recording this. So, and when you're asking questions at the end, if you don't want your beautiful face to be seen, keep your camera off. If you do, turn it on. But this will be recorded. So today's an exciting one. They're all exciting ones, but this one particularly exciting. So we've got quite an eminent scientist here today. We've got Joel Coelho, and Joel is a professor of biosystems engineering and director of the Biosystems Engineering Laboratory and director of grad studies for interdisciplinary applied biosciences. The title on your door must be enormous, Joel. And he's at the University of Arizona. You need to bear in mind, we've had the University of Arizona speakers before. We had Duke Pauly from Arizona as well. So clearly a hotbed of interesting science for the James Hutton Institute. So Joel's had a really interesting background, and there's been a lot of focus on things like the interaction of light and biomass is probably the best way to describe it. More laterally with vertical farming, but also microalgae and photobioreactors. And a lot of it focused for land-based systems, but also looking at I often like to say Elon Musk territory, but looking at interstellar travel and the potential for growing biomass foods, probably pharma in space as well, because it's all going to have to be the green economy. And kind of to that background, he's worked on projects looking at the best title ever, the boring vertical farm for the Moon and Mars, which is one of the best titles ever. His background is he ended his PhD in agriculture and biological engineering from Penn State, a couple of MSc degrees, Penn State University as well. And he spent some time working in the Controlled Ecological Life Support System Division at NASA. Were you working with Gary Stute when you were there? Was Gary
yes,
still there?
yes, yeah. Very much, yes.
I was going to say it's a small world, but that's an ironic phrase given you're working at NASA. Anyway, today, right. and if you get a chance, go onto YouTube and have a look at Joel's videos. There's some really interesting ones there. We're talking about his TED Talk in AI earlier on, which is good to watch. So today, Joel's going to talk about infinite agriculture. A new food system revolution has begun. And I'm going to let Joel pick up the thread here and give you an engaging talk. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you, Derek. It's a privilege to be here today, and thanks to Ramin as well. And thanks to the James Hutton Institute, the Advanced Plant Growth Center. So I'm going to talk about infinite agriculture. A new food system revolution has begun. Ramin, next, please. All right. So we all know that we're facing today an urgent planetary grand challenge, and that is food. And that is mainly because our global population is continuing to increase. Next slide, please. By the middle of the century, we're expected to go up to about, we're right now at 8.1 billion, and this is expected to increase to about 9.5 billion. So that's like adding another China on our planet today in terms of population. So that's really a very tall order in terms of feeding everyone 3 times a day. Now, the Food and Agricultural Organization made a projection a few years back that to be able to meet the food demand by the middle of the century, we need to increase our food production by 70%. And in terms of crop production, we have to double it. Next slide, please. But that's really a tall order because already our current food production is already responsible for 70% of all freshwater withdrawals. We're already using about half of all habitable land on our home planet, and we're using about 30% of all energy expenditures on food production as well as the food supply chain. So we're going to double our food or our crop production by the middle of the century. There is that essential question: where are we going to get our fresh water, the extra habitable land, and also the energy expenditure to be able to meet such demand? Next slide, please. And on top of that, of course, we have the disruptions that are being wrought by the changing climate. Next slide. And if you consider as well the planetary hydrologic cycle, which is severely disrupted. Next slide, please. There was this recent finding that was published by the Global Commission on the Economics of Water this year, that the Earth's hydrologic cycle has been disrupted through massive land use conversion. So forests have been converted to farms, and then farms have been converted into urban areas. And that has really affected the green water component of the hydrologic cycle, in addition to the blue water component of the hydrologic cycle, so that there's been this significant shift where the rain falls and where it does not. And that, of course, causes severe drought in certain areas and flooding in others. And the scale is local, national, regional, and even intercontinental. Next slide, please. This came out just a few weeks, I believe a couple of weeks ago. In the Caspian Sea, there is this significant shrinkage of the body of water. And in the Sahara Desert, there's been unusual flooding that occurred in the southeastern part of Morocco, kind of illustrating again a disruption of the hydrologic cycle. Next, please. And in terms of planetary boundaries, next slide, please. The planetary boundaries are indicators for planet resilience by defining safe operating space for the planet. And this was developed by the Stockholm Resilience Center. Next slide, please. So they identified 9 planetary boundaries pertaining to climate change, biosphere integrity, and so on and so forth. And the green circle at the center represents the safe operating space for the planet. And you can see that 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries have already been transgressed, and mainly caused by human activities. Ocean acidification is still within the safe space, but as you can see, it's fast approaching the boundary. And so we hope that it doesn't get transgressed, but more than likely it will be pretty soon. Next slide, please. And it's important to note, of course, that the hierarchy of the Sustainable Development Goals, as developed by the United Nations, is founded on a healthy biosphere. So the economic development, the societal development, or social development, they're all anchored on the health of the biosphere. And if the biosphere is degraded, then all the other development goals are pretty much compromised. Next, please. So it's important recalling how we arrived at our current paradigm for food production. And of course, we need to go back to Norman Borlaug. He graduated from the University of Minnesota. This is around the Second World War. And when he finished his PhD, he went to Mexico, and he served as director of the Wheat Research and Production Program at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center. This was during the time when there was some famine going on in that place in Mexico. And his research goal was to develop disease-resistant and high-yield dwarf wheat variety. It took him 13 years, but he succeeded. And to be able to commercialize his variety, he paired it with inorganic fertilizer input, irrigation input, and pesticide input. And of course, it was wildly successful. And that was the genesis of the Green Revolution, which is intensive agriculture as we know it today. Next, please. Borlaug was able to increase wheat production 5 times and corn production 3 times during his tenure at that research center in Mexico. Next, please. Then after his tenure in Mexico, he was encouraged by the Rockefeller Foundation to visit India because in the northern part of India, there was famine going on as well because the grain production dropped 19% in 1965 to 1966. And the rise in prices in food grains caused migration and widespread starvation. Next, please. So he went to India and he worked with a scientist, M.S. Swaminathan, and together they were able to increase wheat production more than twice. And they actually exceeded the record harvest of wheat in India at that time. Next, please. So the same method of intensive agriculture or the Green Revolution paradigm was adopted in many other countries, Pakistan, Iran, Northern Africa, and so on and so forth. So in 1970, he was deservedly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Next, please. And MS Swaminathan, who worked with Borlaug, eventually went to the Philippines at the International Rice Research Institute, where he served as director. And of course, he implemented the same principles, the same paradigm in rice production. I graduated from the University of the Philippines at Los Baños, which is really very close to where Erie is located. And interestingly enough, when I graduated in 1984, our commencement speaker was Dr. Swaminathan. Next, please. So it didn't take very long before scientists began noticing some negative impacts of the Green Revolution, not only in India, but elsewhere, everywhere where it was applied. First, they noticed the production of few selected crops, resulting in biodiversity loss, because again, they were focusing on these dwarf, high-yielding varieties. Then also they noticed the adverse effects on the soil and the environment, and also the widened income inequality in rural areas. Again, because the Green Revolution requires these costly inputs in terms of fertilizers, pesticides, and so on and so forth. And that created a discrepancy really in income between the producers, the farmers, and the middleman, if you will. Next, please. So with all of these challenges accumulating, Norman Borlaug himself acknowledged it, and he stated that the Green Revolution had brought the planet 20 to 30 years of time, but there's a need for another type of revolution to come in that is more resilient and more sustainable. Unfortunately, that never came during his lifetime. Next, please. So there's a critical need for another agricultural revolution. Next, please. So I'm here to present to you this new form of agriculture that has already arrived, and I've termed it infinite agriculture. Next, please. These are the major characteristics of infinite agriculture. Number one is that it's controlled environment. It's independent of geography, of weather, of season, and climate. It is self-perpetuating or regenerative because it's taking place in a controlled environment. It's possible to recycle and to reuse input nutrient solutions, for instance, until the nutrients are consumed by the crops. It is closed loop or circular, as I mentioned, and it's also resilient and sustainable. Next, please. So I'd like to present to you, I believe I have 5 here examples of infinite agriculture innovations that define what infinite agriculture is about. Next, please. The first one is vertical farming. I'm sure you've heard of this. So this is a classic representation of what vertical farming is, where crops are grown in shelves that are stacked one on top of another. It's taking place in a controlled environment, such as a warehouse environment. And you control all the basic parameters for light, in terms of light quality, photo period, as well as intensity, of course. You control the air temperature, the relative humidity, and so on and so forth. And the crops are grown not in soil, but in hydroponic nutrient solution, or it could be aeroponic system as well. Next, please. The main effect of that is that you're able to regulate the environment so that you can really optimize both the productivity of the crops as well as the quality of the crops, and you're able to do so 365 days a year, 24/7. Now, the technology or the innovation of vertical farming really originated from the space program, both from NASA and the space program of the former Soviet Union. Next, please. Next, please. I did my postdoctoral fellowship at Kennedy Space Center through the U.S. National Research Council Associateship. And I work with the closed ecological life support system, which is really space farming. Next, please. This is a photograph of the biomass production chamber in 1994, and this was the main vertical farming archetype, if you will, that the investigators at Kennedy Space Center were working with. The picture you can see in the picture show here wheat plants. They're being grown hydroponically. You can see that this is dated because the light source that was being used was high pressure sodium lamp. This was 1994. That was the year when the blue LEDs were just coming out commercially. And so the year after this, pretty much everybody switched to red and blue LEDs. Next, please. This is just a picture of Robert Crippen, who was the director of the Kennedy Space Center at the time that I was there. He was the pilot of the maiden flight of the Space Shuttle program, which was the Space Shuttle Columbia. Next, please. Okay, so back to vertical farming. This is the present day example, or a present day example of vertical farm or vertical farming. This is spread in Japan, which is producing about 30,000 heads of lettuce per day. Next, please. This is about 2007 in Tokyo. The gentleman on the right is Mr. Uchiyama, and he's the founder and the CEO of Cosmo Plant. He gave me a tour at the time of the facility that they were building. It was still under construction, but this was the very first vertical farm facility in Japan that exclusively used red and blue LEDs. Next, please. This is Aero Farms in the United States. Next, please. I'm just showing you here some examples of vertical farms. Plenty, of course, here in the United States as well. Next, please. One beautiful thing about vertical farming is, of course, you can measure all of these essential environmental factors that regulate essentially a vertical farm, from humidity to pH to light to CO2 and so on and so forth. And you can monitor all of those data and gather all those data and apply algorithms, including artificial intelligence algorithms, to be able to find the optimal setting for each one of those that would result in the highest yield or highest productivity or highest quality in terms of, say, flavor profile or nutrient profile of the crop. Next, please. And these are the major advantages of vertical farming. You save 80 to 95% of water. You don't need any arable land. Requires significantly less land area because you're going upwards. Less fertilizer because you're recirculating your liquid nutrient solution until the nutrients are assimilated by the plants. You don't need pesticides. Consistently optimal productivity and crop quality, 24/7, 365. Independent of location, independent of climate, weather, and season. Next, please. Next. Oh, yeah. So I just would like to share with you here a case study in the Philippines. Unfortunately, the Philippines is one of the global epicenters of climate change. They're visited by typhoons, normally 20 times a year, but now a lot of those typhoons have just become much more intense. I grew up in the Philippines, even though I'm here now in the US for over 30 years. But when I was a student there in college, typhoon only went up to signal number 3, but now there's signal number 5, which is a super typhoon. And now the typhoon visits the country in the southern part, where historically typhoons never went over the southern part of the Philippines. And now it does. Next, please. Next, this is Super Typhoon Pablo. Next. And now a lot of the growers in that area of the country, in the southern part, they're very confused because now there's excessive heat and excessive rain. So a lot of the high value vegetables that they traditionally were growing in the open field, they no longer could do that because the vegetables would not grow. And so they're forced to have these rudimentary greenhouse structures in which they grow the crops that they used to grow outside. Next, please. And that's a picture of a rudimentary greenhouse that they're using. Next, please. Next. 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 And this is just another part of the Philippines in the middle part. And this is Typhoon Haiyan, which is one of the biggest super typhoons on record. Next, please. And which hit that region about 10 years ago. Next. Next. Right. So I've had this privilege of being introduced to colleagues at a university in that location. And we are working together on developing a modular and portable vertical farm. Next, please. And these are some of my colleagues at that university, Eastern Visayas State University. Next, please. Next. This is just a picture of the vertical farm. Next, please. This is a conventional type of vertical farm. Next, please. The one that I'm showing right now. Next. Okay. However, we have designed an original vertical farm, which we refer to as Eco Vertibox, using locally available materials, low-cost design, and having a proprietary low energy demand air cooling system, and of course, equipped with smart sensors. The idea is to be able to use these modular vertical farms for the local growers to grow high-value vegetables, and at the same time have the vertical farm unit itself transportable, so that when they know that there is extreme weather about to take place, they can transport this and relocate this to a safe location. Next, please. I'm just going to show you here quickly some of the representations of the this original design that we did. So in this case, we have you have the modular unit, and there's a jacket around it, and where we're circulating air around it for cooling. And that air could be either not cooled or it could be cooled depending on the local temperature situation. Next, please. And this one is using water as the coolant. Next, please. Combination of air and water. Next, please. Next. All right. And we've got many combinations of this. And again, these are currently patent pending. And I gave the rights to this to the university on condition that they would make this available to local growers free of charge. Next, please. Next, I'm just going to skip this one. Next, please. And we're collaborating, of course, with the Department of Science and Technology in the Philippines in advancing this project. Next, please. And also with the Department of Agriculture, which has established a national urban and peri-urban agriculture program. Next, please. Okay, and back to the University of Arizona. Next, please. Okay, so we are developing original growing systems for vertical farming, including this V-Hive green box. In the interest of time, I'm just gonna move past this. Next, please. And I've got, grad students and undergrad students, senior engineering students have been working on this. Next, please. Next. If you are interested in this, please contact me and I can elaborate on this. Next, again, in the interest of time, I'm just gonna skip this. Next. This is another growing system that we developed, which is sitting on a mover bot or robot. Next, please. Next. 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 And I'm happy that all of the engineering students who work on this received major awards from the senior capstone design program here at the University of Arizona. Next, please. Okay, next. Okay, so I was in the Philippines for a conference a week ago, and I had a chance to visit the International Rice Research Institute. And so in my discussions, we introduced the concept of vertical farming for rice production. That idea didn't come from me because actually there are already trials that are taking place in China, in Japan, in South Korea. Impacts of the changing climate. Like in the Philippines alone, there are three major typhoons that visited the country in the last month or so. And I just happened to be there at the right window of time where there was no typhoon. One typhoon went out of the country and one was just about to enter. And it's really causing significant damage in the rice crops. And so it's very important now to start thinking about the possibility of growing rice, or at least some of the rice crops that are being grown in the country and other southeastern countries as well, in a controlled environment system such as a vertical farm. And studies are still being conducted in terms of the feasibility, but because cooling is not required when rice is grown in the tropics, I think that is a significant factor in terms of potentially making rice production in vertical farms economically attainable. Next, please. Okay, let's move to number 2. Next, please. And we're talking about cultivated meat or cultured meat and clean meat. Next, please. These are all synonymous terms, by the way. Next, please. All right, next. All right. Well, we all know about intensive animal production. They're producing greenhouse gases. It's not very healthy because when the animals are very close together, they tend to infect one another with diseases. And so, as a precaution, they're injected with antibiotics, which is not a good practice. Next, please. So there are many problems associated with animal production. Next, please. All right. And so that is why this concept of lab-grown meat has been revived. And thanks to Mark Post of Maastricht University in the Netherlands, who revived this concept in 2013. Next, please. So instead of growing the entire animal, you collect cells from the animals, and then you grow them in petri dishes, and then ultimately you grow them in bioreactors. And so you save on greenhouse gas emissions to the tune of about 95%, 98% land use, and 98% less land use, and 50% less energy input. Next, please. And so now there are many commercial concerns that are developing lab-grown meat. Next, please. In the interest of time, I'm not going to elaborate on each of these companies. All right, next. Next. Okay, so they're again, they're mass-produced in bioreactors. Next. All right, next. Tyson and Memphis Meats. Next. These are major players in the meat processing industries. So Eat Just is the first company that received a formal approval from a government to commercialize their lab-grown chicken, and that was from the government of Singapore. Next, please. And here in the United States, two companies, Upside Foods and Good Meat, received formal approval both from the Department of Agriculture as well as the Food and Drug Administration to commercialize their products. Next. And there are companies that are also working on cell-based seafoods, such as Blue Nalu and Umami Bioworks. Next, please. And they have the same set of advantages, really, as vertical farming. Next, please. This is Mark Posen I met at a conference in Germany a couple of years ago. Next, please. Okay. Innovation number 3, next. Yeah, fungal-based meat, next. All right, so what we refer to as mushroom really is the fruiting body of mycelia or mycelium cells. So with this infinite agriculture innovation, it's not the fruiting bodies that are being grown, but it's the mycelium. Because the mycelium contains the same nutrients as the fruiting body. And it's much easier to grow the mycelium in bioreactors. They can be grown much more efficiently, both in terms of time as well as resource use. Next, please. And that's precisely what this company is doing. Next. Okay, Mush Labs, and they changed their name now to Infinite Roots. Is based in Hamburg in Germany, and Mazen Risk is the founder and the CEO. Next. Next. Right. So they're growing the mycelia in bioreactors, and then they harvest them and concentrate them, and they could form a ball out of that mycelium. Next. And so one of the protein products that they have are meatballs, except that these are not made of meat, but made of a mushroom or mycelia. Next, please. And so this innovation of infinite agriculture also has the same advantages as vertical farming and lab-grown meat. Next. Recently, or initially, they raised $10 million to scale up their mushroom fermentation technology. Next. And I was invited at a retreat in Hamburg in 2021. Next. And that's where I got to meet Mazen Risk. Next. And just this year, he was able to raise $58 million for his company. And I'm pointing this out just to demonstrate the fact that there is significant interest in this type of innovation, of this particular type of infinite agriculture, because it's really environmental friendly. It really prevents a lot of environmental damages. And at the same time, it is very nutritious. Next, please. Here's another company that is based here in the United States, Ecovative, that's also using mycelia. And they're producing bacon, for instance, out of it. It's not real bacon, but it's made of mycelium bacon. And they're also using mycelia for producing certain materials such as foam and leather. And so they become sustainable. Next. All right, number 4. Next, please. Algae-based meat. Next. All right. So Sophie's Bionutrients is a Taiwanese company that's operating in Singapore, and they have developed this algae-based meat. For instance, they have this burger patty. Next, please. And they also develop crab cakes. Next. They're using chlorella, the microalgae chlorella, and it's been approved by the Singapore Food Agency as well as the European Food Safety Authority for use for human consumption. Next, please. Right. So what they do is they mass produce the algae in bioreactors. They harvest them, they dry them, they turn them into flour, and then they use food technology techniques such as extrusion to be able to convert this into a what looks like a burger patty. Next, please. Like this. Next. And it has twice the amount of protein as a similar serving of beef. Each 60-gram patty delivers 24 grams of protein, contains all 9 essential amino acids, and high in B vitamins such as B12, and no cholesterol. Next, please. All right. Again, the same advantages as all the other infinite agriculture innovations. Next, please. And there are companies here in North America that are already working on the same thing. Triton, based in San Diego, California, and Small Food, based in Halifax in Canada. Next, please. All right, next. All right, microalgae. So this is one of my research areas in addition to vertical farming. And my laboratory group has developed quite a number of original bioreactors that the University of Arizona has patented and now being licensed to companies. Next, please. This being one of them, this is the next. This is known as the air accordion photobioreactor. Next. And again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip through these slides. Next, please. Next. But I can tell you that these bioreactors are high-performance bioreactors. Next, please. Next. Bubble column, of course, is the simplest one. It's not patented. It's widely used, and we're using it for one of the projects that we have for producing spirulina for to produce protein as a supplement for kids living in low-income countries. Next, please. And I'm doing that in collaboration with colleagues at the Health Sciences College here at the University of Arizona. Next, please. Next. So this is the air accordion photobioreactor. Next. 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 And again, if you're interested in this, just please contact me and I can provide elaborations. Next. 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 All right. And then we also have this airlift reactor variation. Next, please. This is the last reactor example, which is the first benchtop prototype of a 360 series internal air loop reactor. Next, please. Yes. You know, the normal internal air loop is just one riser and one downcomer, but who says it should be just one pair? It can be more than that. So that's what we did. Next, please. Next. Again, for those who are interested in reactor designs, please contact me on this. Next, please. All right. The final innovation that I want to share with you, and there are many other innovations of infinite agriculture. Next, please. And I'm sure you're familiar with plant-based products or plant-based meat, but I want to share here with you a vertically looped plant-based meat. Next, please. So you've all heard of Beyond Burger. This is nice because, again, compared with conventional animal meat, you really save significantly on water, on land, on feed, on hormones when you go this route. But the only concern that I had with, or I have with a lot of the plant-based meat products is that they're still using plant ingredients that are grown in open fields. And so, you know, they're still incurring the same challenges or problems of conventional agriculture in terms of the use of pesticides, significant amounts of fertilizers, irrigation, and so on and so forth. Next, please. Next. Next. Okay. However, okay, so better environmentally compared to traditional livestock production, but still poses significant environmental challenges. Next, please. However, there is this one company, it's called Orbi Farm, which I think is really exemplary because they're doing plant-based products or plant-based meats, but they're growing the plants that they use, in this case, peas, in vertical farms, which definitely is a much more sustainable and resilient method of production. Next, please. And I got to meet recently the founder and CEO, Jan Braddock. This is a Swiss company, but it's operating in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. Next, please. All right. So again, infinite agriculture is not only a new method of producing food, but it constitutes a new paradigm, a new revolution for producing food. And this is really, I'm arguing that this is the only paradigm for food production that really is on a par with the traditional green revolution. And my stance on this is that as we develop infinite agriculture, the goal is not to replace completely green revolution or conventional agriculture or high input agriculture, because I think that's not going to happen. Not in our lifetime for sure, because there is a need for that still. However, there is a need to really develop infinite agriculture so that we can rebalance our method of food production. Next, please. And so this will result in the great rebalancing of the Earth's global food system, which we need to do so that the planet has a way of breathing, if you will, of being able to recuperate environmentally and not be under significant or enormous or destructive pressure to be able to meet the food demand of the human race, particularly in the coming years. Next, please. And I just want to acknowledge and thank my colleagues at the Association for Vertical Farming, which is based in Munich, Germany. Next, please. And these are some of my grad students here at the University of Arizona. I just want to acknowledge them. And that is Wilbur and Wilma, who are the they are the mascots of the University of Arizona. Next, please. Yes. And that's my contact information. Feel free to communicate with me, to ask me questions. But I'm happy to entertain questions now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Raman, if you want to stop sharing so we can see everyone, should they want to ask questions. I've got some questions that would be worth asking. Oh, sorry, I think they're worth asking. I suspect, let's open up and identify the elephant in the room. Donald's back in as the big leader, and the markets are I think they're buoying up because Donald's come in. Where are you going to put your money on those innovation areas, Joe? Which one do you think is going to make the big difference?
Oh yeah. Okay, so right now, the plant-based products, as well as the mycelium products, they are a commercial reality now. Mm-hmm. And I'm very much happy to put my money in the mycelium products for sure. The algae is also a commercial reality now, but it's still developing. The lab-grown meat, I think, would be truly high impact. They're now, again, they have their official approval from the government here in the United States, as well as in Singapore. However, it's not widely commercialized here in the United States. And I think that's because they're still perfecting it in the sense of trying to really lower down the cost. At this point, I think they're on a par in terms of price with organic meat. But not a lot of Americans are going for organic meat in terms of price. And so they're still doing the proper research to be able to lower down the cost. But I'm putting my bet on lab-grown meat. That is a game changer.
So again, I'll maybe follow that one up. I mean, I'm also working in areas of alternative protein. So that behind me is an alternative proteins innovation center we're running now here as well, or our co-directors in. And cellular agriculture is part of that.
Yes.
And it strikes me there's I mean, I could see it, and I've tasted some of it, and I think when you looking at processed meats, it is indistinguishable, to be honest, a lot of it. But the two killer facts are scale up. Scale up means fermentation systems that have to be big. But because you've got mammalian cells, you can't scale up physically because you can't maintain temperature, stir hard because you shear the cells.
That's right.
But also then, do you think so which means lots of smaller-ish ones. So do you think then the food production system for that will migrate to places where the energy is cheaper? So it won't be based, where food's produced may change. So if you have wind and hydropower, your food production system may just go there.
Yes, and that's what I believe, because again, we've got all of these wonderful benefits that are being offered to us by infinite agriculture innovations, because it's taking place in a controlled environment system. But the price that is paid for is in terms of energy, and of course, we prefer to have renewable energy. And so places around the planet where there is significant amounts of renewable energy, those are the candidate places where infinite agriculture innovations could really flourish.
Yeah, we
So we're talking about the Middle East. We're talking about the Middle East. We're talking about Iceland because they have geothermal energy, and other places where there's solar and wind and geothermal and other forms of renewable energy.
Oh, okay. I'll ask a few more questions then. The spirulina one's interesting to me because spirulina, it looks really attractive in terms of its protein content. But if you've ever eaten anything with spirulina in it, you know you're tasting spirulina. So I would argue that pea protein's much the same as well. It's difficult to mask that taste. So do you think we're any closer to getting over that barrier? Because
okay, that's a very good point that you raised. And I don't know whether I should talk about it or not, but okay, so we have a team here at the University of Arizona. Professor Skeet Chilton is a partner, a collaborator of mine in this project. We're growing spirulina. On the one hand, we want to develop it as a low-cost technology to provide nutrition for kids in developing economies. On the other hand, we're developing a high-value product that is really a combination of microbes that will provide really high potency in terms of antioxidants, omega-3 fatty acids, one of which is spirulina. But again, we recognize that it has a fishy taste. But we have found an indigenous group that's been traditionally working with spirulina, and they have developed these age-long methods that they have of being able to remove that fishy taste. And so we are collaborating with them, forming a relationship with them so that we could have a mutual partnership whereby they would transfer that knowledge to us, and then we would also transfer knowledge to them, and we could share in the economic benefits.
I think if you can make that work, you'll make a lot of money, or you all make a lot of money, Joel, to be honest. So, one final one, and it kind of struck me, I don't know if I read it right, when I was watching the Eco Verte box, where you had the grow box and you had the thing around it and you were cooling it, or water cool. That struck me, that's almost Egyptian technology, where you're cooling water. From the times of the Pharaoh, they used to cool down things by just putting fabrics across the top and running water over it. It drops the temperature. Or even
I guess I suppose it's a similar principle, yes.
That kind of goes back to the concept, there are no new ideas left in the world. They're just refining them. Okay, so in terms of time, I'll just have a quick check again. Here's a question. Will culture meat, fungal meat, and algal-based meat be able to be produced without the product being ultra-processed? That's a very topical question there.
Right. I think it is possible, yes. Yes, and again, this is why we're cooperating with food scientists and food technologists to be able to come up with a food product that, number one, does not use humongous amounts of extra ingredients. We want the ingredients to be to a limited number. And number two, that the amount of processing involved is really minimized, so that we're able to use the ingredient as whole, if you will, as possible.
Okay. Laura, I would also say I think the evidence for ultra-processed food is not huge, or the impact on health isn't massive. And I think it's interesting, the dialogue on that's very interesting. So the dialogue the industry uses for ultra-processing food, people just call it processed food, and it's created things like canning processes for vegetables that has meant food is widely available, maintains nutrition content. So it's one end of a long wedge, I would say. So that dialogue will continue for a while. So
yeah.
Okay, so thank you all for the audience. If you can just show your appreciation in the usual manner. And Joel, thanks very much for that. And I'm sure we'll be in contact again, particularly about some of the grow box systems. I know some people might be interested. So lovely to see you, and we'll chat again soon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye
Bye.
for now.